see a shift. It's important to understand that the structure of Sefer Shmot, the book of Shmot, the book of Exodus, is as follows. You have the first four parshiot, right? The first four parshiot are Shmot, Vayera, Bo B'Shalach, which is basically telling us or continuing the story of Am Yisrael from Sefer Bereshit, right? The beginning of Sefer Shmot is really the continuation of Sefer Bereshit, continuing the narrative of the formation of Israel, the story of Israel. Then we get to Parashat Yitro, and Yitro and Mishpatim are suddenly laws, right? Now we're getting hit with a bunch of rules, right? We receive the Torah, Sinai. The book of Shmot is really is going to essentially be a crisis. It's the crisis of the golden calf. But we'll see how Vayakel and Pikudei, which come after Kitisa, differ slightly from what we see in Terumah and Tetzaveh, right? Terumah and Tetzaveh is basically the instructions for building the Mishkan and the uniforms of the Kohanim and all that. But we should understand that Terumah is very much from the perspective of Moshe, and Tetzaveh is from the perspective of Aaron. Now, what are these two perspectives? What's the difference between the perspective of Moshe and the perspective of Aaron when it comes to the Mishkan? From Moshe's perspective, remember, who are Moshe and Aaron, right? What is their relationship to each other, to the people, to prophecy, right? They're on the one hand, we can say that Moshe and Aaron corrected brotherhood. Throughout the book of Bereshit, we essentially see the failure of brothers, starting with Cain and Hevel, right? Brothers being jealous of each other, brothers hurting each other, brothers being in competition with each other. With Moshe and Aaron, we see brothers who are not at all in competition with each other, who are totally on the same team. And Aaron was the leader of Israel before Moshe showed up, right? Just like Amram, their father, was the leader of Israel when we were slaves in Egypt. The tribe of Levi, we'll say, weren't slaves, but still, Amram led Israel, and then his son Aaron led Israel. And when Moshe shows up, not only is Aaron willing to move over to create space for Moshe to be the leader, he's happy for Moshe and eager to be on his team. Meaning, it's not like Aaron says, okay, now you're the leader, fine, I'm going to go do something else in my life. I'll focus on this other area of life that I want to focus on. No, Aaron continues to function as Moshe's lieutenant, as Moshe's mouthpiece. Actually, Hashem tells Moshe that Moshe is going to be like a god to Paro, and Aaron will be a spokesman. And he even says that Aaron is coming to greet him, and he's happy for him. Like there's no jealousy, there's no competition. So on the one hand, that's good. And that's really good within the context of what we'll talk about next, which is the difference in how they look at the Mishkan. From Aaron's perspective, the purpose of the Mishkan is atonement, is to cleanse the people of their transgressions. That's the function. From Moshe's perspective, what's the purpose? The purpose is divine revelation, and to connect the people to Hashem. You see, we see in the end of Parashat Mishpatim that Moshe entered a cloud atop Har Sinai. Right? This cloud is essentially what we'll call the divine presence. That later starting in Bamidbar, we see that cloud sometimes rests on the Mishkan and sometimes lifts. When it lifts, we travel. When it rests, we stay. And it's also important to understand that after Sefer Shemot, just like Shemot is divided into three pieces, like there's the continued story of Israel, there's laws, and then there's the Mishkan, and the service of the Mishkan, which will also be related to the service in the Mikdash later. The books that follow also continue those three themes, meaning Vayikra. Most people, I think, make the mistake of thinking, well, you have Bereshit, and then you have Shemot, and then you have Vayikra, and then you have Bamidbar, and then you have Devarim. And it's chronological, right? Bereshit takes place before Shemot, Shemot takes place before Vayikra, Vayikra takes place before Bamidbar, Bamidbar takes place before Devarim. Chronologically, it's not necessarily the case. Vayikra and Bamidbar are taking place at the same time. Okay? Vayikra is a continuation of the end of Sefer Shemot, and Bamidbar is a continuation of the beginning of Sefer Shemot. And Dvarim is a continuation of the middle of Sefer Shemot. The laws. Right? But the beginning of Shemot is a continued story of Israel, and that we'll see continuing in Bamidbar. Vayikra is the continued instruction for the Mishkan, for the Kohanim, for the Korbanot, for the things that are relevant to the Beit HaMikdash. And basically, after Sefer Shemot, we have experiences when the cloud rests on the camp and when it lifts. When it rests on the camp, that's Vayikra. And when it lifts, that's Bamidbar. But they're happening at the same time. It's the same period, for the most part. And again, so from Moshe's perspective, because he's not really so connected to the people, he's distant from the people, he's separate from the people. There are even some people, like Miriam specifically, who might criticize him later for this. And it'll become more and more, by the way. Like his separation will increase to a certain extent. He'll have to wear a mask. A lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time he'll be wearing a mask, separate from them, separate from his wife. Whereas Aaron is of the people. Aaron understands the people. And by the way, we can look at the difference between Moshe and Aaron and their understandings of the Mishkan here as being similar to the differences between like the way some of us relate to halakha. I'm going to make a request, guys. It's hard for me to teach when I see people on their phones. If you guys need to communicate with somebody, by all means, but I don't want to be background noise. Appreciate it. So,
let me ask you a question. So,
yeah.
The Mishkan, and when Shlomo built the temple, all the Mishkan was like really nice fabrics and linens, the way they created it. When they built the temple, did they just put all that in the closet? When they had all these fabulous stones of Shlomo?
The Mishkan had
been... They had all the tents and the way they arranged it?
The Mishkan had been destroyed.
Before that. Got destroyed, by effort. When Joshua...
After that.
Joshua had it, right?
Yeah. In the beginning of Shmuel, the Mishkan is destroyed in Shiloh by the Philistines.
So Joshua carried...
After. No, Yoshua had... The Mishkan existed in the time of Yoshua.
So, under what king?
We didn't have a king. Under the judges, at the time of the judges.
Deborah?
Eli.
Oh, Eli.
At the end, at the end. Yeah. Before Shmuel. Shmuel is...
And fire was just the Philistines?
The Philistines attacked it, destroyed it, yeah. But it's important to understand what the Mishkan is and what the Mikdash is. Okay? And we're learning it in this parsha from Moshe's perspective. Moshe's perspective. Yeah, can. Welcome. So, again, what I want to focus on is the difference between Moshe's perspective and Aaron's perspective. If we're saying that Moshe is focusing on the ideal, that the purpose of the Mishkan is about connecting to divine revelation, connecting to Nevuah. He wants to share that experience. Right at the end of last week's Parsha, at the end of Parshat Mishpatim, Moshe enters a cloud. He has an experience. He has an experience of connection to Hashem. And from Moshe's perspective, the purpose of the Mishkan is to share that experience, that the whole nation should have that experience of divine revelation. From Aaron's perspective, he doesn't enter the cloud, but he's of the people, he's with the people, very connected to the needs of the people, the challenges of the people. He sees the Mishkan as a means of cleansing the people of their transgressions, of their shortcomings. That's Aaron's perspective. And we can say that these two perspectives really manifest today when we look at the way different Jewish groups relate to halakha. Right? We can say that there's an approach to halakha which looks at the Torah or looks at halakha or halachic observance as a burden. We want to do it. We have to do it. Hashem said, Hashem loves us. He gave us rules. We have to do them. But the kivun is to make them as non-imposing, as easy. And there's an impulse with this school of thought. There's an impulse to be as lenient as possible, right, in whatever areas we can. There's the other approach, which I think is more the approach found in the path of Rav Kook, is not that we have to do it, but we get to do it. That we realize that this is there's an experience we're having and we want to share with other people. And I think part of the problem sometimes, part of the friction we see in the Jewish world when you have some Jews who are really inspired by the experience, by the spiritual experience of the Torah, and they want to share that with others, they're perceived as trying to push their halachic dogma on other people. They're perceived as trying to force, they're perceived as coercive, as trying to force religion on other people or religious experience on other people who are not feeling it. So that's Moshe's perspective. That, okay, I feel it, it's great, I want to share it. Aaron's perspective is not so fast. Not everybody is holding there, and we need to take where the people are at into consideration. Okay, and I think sometimes we try to make this division like a Yehuda Yosef division. I don't think that's necessarily always accurate, but I think there's a lot of overlap between Jews of the Yehuda persuasion and Moshe's approach, and Jews of the Yosef persuasion and Aaron's approach. Largely because if somebody's already functioning according to the paradigm of Yosef, then there is something we call normal, a normal way to live, or a secular way to live. When we use the word secular, we're basically saying that this is normal, this is baseline, right? That to live this way, to see the world this way, right? So when a Jew or an Israeli identifies as being secular, what they're really saying is, I see Western civilization as the normal way for humans to function, for human to be. And if somebody's connecting to would be seen as something external being imposed and not something internal being expressed. So because Terumah is the Moshe approach to the Mishkan and Tetzaveh is the Aaron approach to the Mishkan, Terumah will start from the inside out. Like when the Torah gives us the description of how, remember, Moshe is now in the cloud, receiving instructions on how to build the Mishkan. In Terumah and Tetzaveh, Moshe receives the instructions on how to create the Mishkan. Ki Tisa will be a crisis, the golden calf. And then Vayakel and Pekudei will be the actual practical building, when Am Yisrael actually does build it. Not when Moshe receives the instructions, but how it happens in practice. And there will be some adjustments, some corrections based on the crisis.
They've already made a full Techelet robe, for the Kohen Gadol.
Great.
It's worth $3 million back in the time of King David. Apparently Techelet was worth more than gold. Not many people could wear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here in Parashat Terumah, we start to see what's inside the Mishkan, right? You have the Kodesh Kodeshim. And in the Kodesh Kodeshim, you have something that is actually very shocking, because we were just told in Parashat Yitro that we're not allowed to make any graven images. What happens when you go into the Kodesh Kodeshim? What do you see?
Nothing. A big room.
And?
The ark.
And what's on top of it?
Angels.
Are those graven images?
Yep.
Yes.
So why would it be that if we're instructed, we're forbidden from creating engraven images, and as soon as we come to the Mishkan, the holiest, the Holy of Holies in the
Well,
Mishkan,
is it really a graven image though? Because when I think of graven image, I think of the face, right?
they had faces. I
Were
mean,
they covered?
I don't know if covered, but they were
Like,
certainly
isn't that an
in the
instruction?
shape. They had wings.
There's certainly the suggestion of the face.
Yeah, there's. I mean, whether or not practical faces or not, it's a little. There's a lot of things happening here that we should take note of. There's Keruvim. First of all, there's Keruvim in the Kodesh Kodeshim. It would be shocking if somebody were to read the Torah in university and see that you understand it on a very surface level, or even a little bit of a deep level. Let's say they didn't learn it. Let's say they went to Yeshiva University and learned the Torah, and then they say, okay, we're not allowed to make idols, no graven images, and then they took a trip to Jerusalem and went to the temple and somehow got into the Kodesh Kodeshim. They'd say, what's going on
What is
here?
an idol anyway? There's the ancient perception of what an idol is.
Yeah.
They actually believe that their gods are dwelling inside of.
Right, but there's a prohibition not just against. There's a prohibition against accepting a god other than Hashem, but there's also a prohibition about graven images, right? And that's going on here. That's happening here in the Kodesh Kodeshim. Not only in the Kodesh Kodeshim, it's happening on the curtains separating between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodeshim. And not only that, the curtains are actually made from linen and wool. It's shatnez. And not only that, the uniforms of the Kohanim are made from shatnez, linen and wool. So what's going on? We have all these things that are forbidden, and they're all happening in the Mishkan and later in the Beit HaMikdash. Why is that? Why is it? What's going on here?
And also Shabbat.
What?
They won't do it in Shabbat.
And fire on Shabbat also. What's going on here? So I'll tell you what's going on. The Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash should be understood as an embassy of higher worlds. Right? In this world, shatnez is forbidden. In this world, engraven images is forbidden. Right? Fire on Shabbat is forbidden. That's true for this world, this planet. The way the Torah reveals itself in our world, that is the truth. The Mishkan is an embassy of a higher world, where the laws are different, the rules are different, reality is different, nature is different. Right? It's an embassy of a higher world. And therefore the Kohanim are not allowed to take their uniforms outside of the Mikdash. Right? The Kohanim can't go home in their Bigdei Kehuna. They got a locker room or whatever they have to change into their regular civilian clothes before they leave. Because you can't wear shatnez over there. Right? You can only wear shatnez over here. So what are the Keruvim? It's important that if we understand what the Keruvim are, we can understand what they're doing there. The first time in the Torah, Keruvim, those are these. Oh. So where do we first see them in the Torah? Close. Right outside Gan Eden. After Adam and Chava are expelled from Gan Eden, we see the Torah says that Hashem places Keruvim and a sword of fire that spins, like a spinning sword of fire, guarding the entrance to Gan Eden. Right? So you have Keruvim. So already we can say Keruvim are their purpose, their function is to stand at the border between worlds. That's the purpose of Keruvim. They stand at the border between different worlds. Okay, so we're saying that the Kodesh is a different world than the world outside the Kodesh, and the Kodesh Kodeshim is a different world than the Kodesh, and we're saying that the Aron, what's in the Aron? The Aron possesses the Luchot HaBrit, right? The tablets. That's an expression of divine revelation that's already been revealed, that's already been expressed. And what's on top? On top you have the Keruvim, and we say that Moshe heard the divine voice coming from the space in between the Keruvim, meaning that on top of the Aron, on top of where the Luchot are, you have continued revelation coming through in the space between these Keruvim. Okay, and Moshe is receiving that Nevuah. Now, the Aron and the Shulchan, by the way, because in the Kodesh you have we enter the Mishkan from the east. Okay, we enter the Mishkan from the east. To our right is the Shulchan, the showbread. To our left is the menorah. So on the south is the menorah. To the north is the Shulchan. And going straight, we see a curtain that's shatnez with Keruvim on it. Behind that is the Kodesh Kodeshim, so we're going west to the Kodesh Kodeshim. And in there is the Aron with the Luchot, and on top the Keruvim.
When did they build the menorah?
In Parashat Pikudei, I believe.
So after Moshe's time.
No, during Moshe's time.
But I thought the miracle only happened on Hanukkah.
No, that's a different. That was a makeshift menorah.
Oh, so that was a different one to celebrate the days.
Yes, that was a makeshift. That menorah had been destroyed, defiled, and they created a makeshift menorah.
So in the Kodesh Kodeshim, it was gold on the wall, the ceiling, and the floor.
What? First of all, what is gold in the Torah?
Gold.
What is gold in the Torah?
Zahav.
No, yeah, okay, zahav, nachon. When the Torah talks about zahav, today when we hear about gold, we think it means wealth, right? Gold is like money. Gold is wealth. Now, when the Torah talks about gold, it's for the most part talking about spiritual wealth, spiritual values, and when it talks about kesef, silver, it's talking about material value, like material wealth. Okay, so look at everything in the Mishkan. You have the Aron and the Shulchan, which are basically made from acacia wood, and gold. So why? And the menorah, what's the menorah? The menorah is made from pure gold, but in the shape of a tree.
So it has to be from a single block of gold.
The menorah does. Why? So the menorah has to be from a single piece of gold. Why?
That's a lot of gold.
What? It's a lot of gold. But the question is why? What do all these things mean? That's really what I want to focus on. First of all, we're seeing a combination between wood and gold already in everything. In the Aron, in the Shulchan, and in the menorah. The Shulchan and the Aron are made from a combination of acacia wood and gold. And the menorah is pure gold in the shape of a tree.
Oh, metal and wood.
Uh-huh. So wood is natural.
It's not conductive.
Metal
is conductive electricity.
That's true. But again, we're talking about gold in this instance as spiritual values. Wood is the natural world, our natural passions, right? Our life forces. Right, that's represented by wood, and we're meant to have that combination always, to be able to fully express our natural passions in life, but guided by spiritual values. Right, that's the gold, and the menorah itself is pure gold, but in the shape of a tree, because the menorah basically represents wisdom. The Aron is divine revelation. Right? Wisdom from beyond this world. The Shulchan is material success, right? And the menorah is divine wisdom mixed with human wisdom. It's the wisdom we participate with Hashem in creating and giving to the world. So because our Torah is actually holistic, because our wisdom is holistic, the menorah has to be from a single piece of wood. And it has 7 branches, symbolizing the 6 days of the week and Shabbat, at the center. But it's basically...
And the altar. The altar is the rock, or is the altar...
We're not getting into the altar yet. The altar is actually not revealed to us. The altar in the Mishkan is not revealed to us quite yet. And there's a reason for that. But we're seeing that there is a channel. This divine revelation comes into the world through 2 different channels. On the north, it's the Shulchan, which is material success, material bracha. Right? You have 12 loaves of bread, which show that even though Hashem's bracha rests on the nation as a collective, it also rests on 12 tribes.
You get 2 tables or 1 table? 12 breads on 1 table?
12 breads on the Shulchan.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have the menorah on the south, which is divine, which is wisdom that we participate with Hashem. And again, the menorah represents what we're giving out to the world. The light shines out to the world, right? That's revelation we're meant to share with humanity.
I have a question about the gold. So it's like all from Egypt, right? It's the gold and silver that they all collected. So are we just supposed to assume that they collected this giant block of gold from Egypt?
Perhaps. Now, the fact that we left Egypt with gold is also important, because some of that gold is going to go to building the Mishkan, but some of that gold is going to build the golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
And the meaning that when we leave the exile, all of us, right? All of us came from somewhere else, right? None of us were born in this country. So we come here with gold. We come here with values. We come here with cultural influences, right? Like I grew up in New York City. I'm very much a product of New York. But when I come here, I have to decide what gold did I bring here from New York that is the Mishkan, and what gold did I bring here that's the, meaning I have to sift. I have to decide, well, what is conducive to living the life I want to live here on a personal level, on a national level, creating the type of society I want to create here. What do we bring from all the places we come from that's conducive to that mission? And what do we bring with us that could get in the way, that needs to be discarded? And to sift, the actual mechanism that we need to use for sifting, for filtering, is emunah. It's like the study of emunah. To understand who we are, what our mission is, what our aspirations are, what kind of society are we trying to create here. The more we know that, the more we're plugged into that, the more we can easily identify what aspects of the gold we bring from elsewhere are meant to go this way and meant to go that way. Right? What is the Mishkan and what is the golden calf? And I imagine that they did bring a giant block of gold. Otherwise, how could we have made the menorah from gold, from a single piece of gold, if we didn't bring a giant block of gold? I've never seen that written anywhere that we did, but I assume we did, because otherwise, how could we do what we're doing? All right? So that does make sense. So the divine revelation is channeled in two different ways, right? The Aron is channeled in two different ways. You have the showbread, the shulchan, and you have the menorah, and they're mutually dependent. They're connected to each other, because the only way we can really shine our light to the world, as expressed by the menorah, is by having material success and being independent in our land. Like, if we don't have that material success and material independence in our land, how can we give anything to the rest of the world? Even if we're independent, but we're like a poor country and we're existing on handouts and charity from other countries or diaspora Jews or whatever, we can't influence the world. We can't lead the world. The menorah symbolizes actually what we're meant to give to the world. Like, if we could say the Magen David is the Jewish nationalist symbol, then the menorah should be the universalist symbol, like the symbol for Hebrew universalism, that this is like the light we have to give to the world. When we transition from just being nationalist to being universalist. And we start seeing that we have a function, a role to play facing humanity, and not just for our own preservation and protection and success. So all this is really coming down to the experience and the approach of Moshe. Right? And we'll see that one thing I said in the beginning before you guys came in is that the Torah is not exactly chronological. That Shmot is divided into three sections. You have the beginning, the first four parshiyot, which basically continue the story of Bereshit, continue the development of Israel. Then you have two in the middle, Yitro and Mishpatim, which are laws. Basically, we're getting rules now. And then you have the last five, which essentially deal with the Mishkan. In the middle, you have Kitisa, which is a crisis, but you have the two before and the two after, which are essentially dealing with the Mishkan and the service and the Kohanim and the Korbanot, etc. And Vayikra will be the continuation of the end, Bamidbar will be the continuation of the beginning, and Dvarim will be the continuation of the middle. And Bamidbar and Vayikra are taking place at the same time. Meaning the cloud that Moshe enters at the end of Mishpatim sometimes rests on the Mishkan. When it rests on the Mishkan, we stay still, and that's Vayikra. When it lifts, we travel, and that's Bamidbar. So we should understand Vayikra and Bamidbar to both be the continuation of Sefer Shemot, happening simultaneously. Sometimes the cloud is resting and we're Vayikra, and sometimes the cloud is lifting and we're Bamidbar. But it's really continuing both parts of Sefer Shemot, and then we get more rules in Dvarim, which is basically continuing from Yitro and Mishpatim. But that takes place chronologically after Vayikra and Bamidbar. So that's essentially what's going on in Terumah. Any questions?
Yeah. So why are we reading Terumah now in this month at this time? Is it specific in the Hebrew calendar that we read?
Do the Parshiot necessarily go according to? Not necessarily. I mean, it doesn't fit perfectly. I think it fits as it's supposed to fit.
Season or something?
Meaning, like, if that were true, then we would probably be learning like Parshat Bo and Parshat B'Shalach during Pesach, right? Like, if it was true that it would all match up to like what happened and whatever, it can't work like that. That's not the way the Parshiot are organized. But it's good I think it's good that we don't, because it gives us a chance to get our heads into the Exodus narrative a few months before Pesach. And then we come back to it. It's like Chazara, when we try to like learn for Leil Seder and we try to get ourselves into the headspace of what's going on Pesach, where we're supposed to be at Pesach. We've already gone through all those Parshiot. Like we've already gone, like it's not like from last year. Sometimes things happen, you go into Yom Kippur, you're trying to remember, well, what was Yom Kippur like last year? Right? You get to Pesach, and it's a story you're familiar with because you learned the Parsha a couple months ago. So you know, like, oh yeah, like we were there, like I'm familiar with that narrative. And now it's just kind of Chazara.
What's the point of the showbread?
To the material well-being of the nation.
And what's the shape of the bread?
Oh, that's a good question. In my head, it's loaves of bread, but it could be they weren't. It could be they're pitot. I don't know.
Because it doesn't like specify.
No. I assume we'll know when we have to know, but I don't. Or maybe people do know. I don't know. I think the pictures I've seen have been like loaves of bread as we understand loaves of bread to be today. Like you walk into a supermarket before Shabbat and you have those real like rectangle like loaves, like that they sell in the supermarkets. Like that's what I think I've seen in the pictures.
Wasn't that what the Omer sacrifice is from? The 2 loaves of like the block of whole wheat bread.
Okay. No, the bread in the shulchan is not necessarily the bread that we see elsewhere, but it's a good question whether or not the bread has to be exactly this bread, or there's room to have different types of bread, different styles of bread in the Mishkan. I'm pretty sure it wasn't white bread. I imagine like all bread back then was what today we call sourdough bread.
Or wholemeal.
So it wouldn't have been like the processed white bread that we're used to having today. All right. So how do I turn this off? I just press stop.